Hello, welcome back to my studio. Today I'm looking at one of the most popular questions that I get asked. It's how do I keep my colors vibrant? So we're going to look at a number of instances that is helping to keep your color vibrant, and also things that are going to take away the vibrancy of your color. Let's jump in. Alright, I'm going to be looking specifically at oil paints, but a lot of these tips will overlap with acrylics and even watercolor and gouache as well. The habits that you learn here will influence color vibrancy no matter what painting medium you use. Alright, well, there's a few things that come into this, of course. One is the color you're going to be using. Now, you don't have to have the most expensive artist quality paint. I'm going to be using My Mary Classico, which is an excellent student quality paint. If you use the wrong techniques and make the same old mistakes, it doesn't matter what the paint you use, you're still going to lose vibrancy. Another issue that we'll touch on is your brushwork. How you use your brush will help to create more vibrancy or take it away. And of course, don't forget your knowledge of color. The old color wheel, it's going to help you get the most out of your color as well. Another important issue is how you clean your brush while you're painting as well as at the end of the day. Dirty brush or a dirty medium is not going to help you get a vibrant color. Anyway, there's quite a lot to touch on, so I'm going to cut to the easel and we'll do this step by step. Alright, first step in better vibrancy. Let's have a look at the colors I'm going to be using. This is probably my smallest palette that I would use. Titanium white, lemon yellow, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, red light and alizarin crimson. You can add burnt sienna if you want to for convenience and yellow ochre, but they're also easy to mix from these primary colors. I've got the extra cerulean blue in there to make a cooler green. These are all student colors. In fact, I'm using My Mary Classico. It's a good quality student color and is what a lot of artists at home will be using. Here is artist quality paint. For instance, this is cadmium orange. This is Rembrandt. We'll have a look at that. Cadmium orange. It is super powerful color. And then we'll compare it to My Mary cadmium orange. And you can see a distinct difference in pigment strength there. The artist quality by Rembrandt, quite a more vibrant orange, and My Mary not as vibrant as that. Not all colors are that markedly different, but it does show you that artist quality color should have a distinctly better pigment strength. So that in itself can influence your vibrancy, and a lot of professionals will be using this kind of paint for that very reason. But if your technique is wrong, you are going to make this artist quality paint look less vibrant, and that would be a waste of money. If we get these techniques right, you'll make the most of your paint. Okay, so the first thing that influences vibrancy is the mix that you put into your paint. Now let's say we take this lemon yellow. This is a fully saturated lemon yellow. As you can see, really nice and vibrant. But when you're painting, you can't, in most cases, simply use the fully saturated paint into your painting. It's going to be just too much, especially if you're doing a natural sort of scene. In nature, color has been desaturated in many ways, and you need to try and get that right. So very often, if you're going to make this lighter, you'll put in a little bit of white paint and you'll get the color has just been broken a bit with white paint, and that will probably look a lot more natural than fully saturated straight out the tube. However, when you put in too much white paint, and this is possibly the most common problem. A lot of beginners hear about adding white paint and they simply put in too much, and you end up with something that is quite pastel, and you can keep going and going and going, and you think, I want my paint brighter and more vibrant, so I'm going to put in more white. But actually the opposite happens. You can see fully saturated, you've gone right down to this cool pastel color. If you get this mix into your dark colors, for instance, you're going to have real problems with those darks, and they're also going to be of a poor vibrancy. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's mix up a dark shadow color. Let's say we've got a bit of ultramarine and put in a little touch of alizarin to get us a dark purple shadow color. All right, so there it is, beautiful transparent dark. If I'm using too much white in a mix and I get some of that white into that color and it's yellow, like in this case, you can see what's happening. I'm losing the vibrancy. So there's white, there's alizarin, and alright, so now I'm getting into a violet. That may be a nice color somewhere, but in my dark shadow, it ruins the dark shadow. So now that shadow is no longer vibrant, and when I get in these colors mixed up into there, into that violet, we start heading into dangerous territory. We're heading into gray. One complement mixing into another complement ends up with a sort of a gray color. All of these are steps to losing the vibrancy. If this is what you wanted for your shadow and some of this crept into it, you end up with these more opaque and much less vibrant colors. Avoid mixing dirty color notes. All right, so every color is a note, no matter what you mix. But when you inadvertently get bits of color into your mix, or you get white paint where it shouldn't be, such as in these shadow colors, you end up with dirty color notes. So be very careful of how you mix your color and make sure you're not getting colors that shouldn't be there, like a violet into that yellow, and has now turned it into a dirty color note. How can you avoid dirty color notes? Well, obviously making negligent mistakes, negligent mixing. Other things that can cause dirty color notes is if your brush is full of a color that shouldn't be there. So if I've got violet mixed in to my brush and I pick up yellow and start mixing it and then bring in white, well, I no longer have a nice yellow, I don't even have a decent green. I'm starting to mix up a muddy, dirty color note, right? Because my brush wasn't clean. So how do you make sure your brush is clean? Well, during painting, I wipe off the brush with tissue after probably every second brush stroke. And that usually is sufficient. When I'm picking up a lot of paint and clean that brush off with the tissue, and I'm then picking up sort of similar colors, you can see things are mixing up quite nicely. There's no problem here. The vibrancy in these oranges is not affected. If I wipe the brush off with tissue and then start mixing, maybe if I want to mix up a green and I've got reds in there, I'm going to end up with something that could be a burnt sienna or an olive green, and it all goes wrong. So I have a couple of brushes to work with, one for your darker colors. A good rule is to try and keep your brush wiped clean, and to try and keep a brush that is reserved for lighter warm colors and another one for the cooler dark colors. Now another problem may be that you need to clean your brush with some solvents. Sometimes the brush just gets way beyond a simple wipe off with a tissue and you need to get something to clean your brush. Now I've got some white spirits in here and I go to the edge of that, get some white spirits in, clean off with the tissue. And it's not perfect, but it's still okay unless this orangey color gets into maybe a blue that I want to work with. And it is already influencing this cerulean over here and getting it almost a turquoise green. So that brush wasn't cleaned off sufficiently. It has loosened up the orange in there with white spirits and dirtied it up. Alright, so if you're going to clean your brush with solvent, take a bit of time to make sure it is absolutely clean and doesn't leave any residue, because that will get in. Now the other problem is, of course, your solvent may have too much paint in it. This is now quite dirty. This clean brush, put it in there and look at that soupy mess. Right? That is going to influence the vibrancy of your paint color. As you can see, that nice and clean yellow has now got a brownish tint to it. That has also lost vibrancy. So if you clean your brushes with solvent, clean them thoroughly, dry them off with your tissue so none of that solvent gets into your color as well. Secondly, make sure your spirits or your turpentine or whatever you're using, Gamsol, is cleaned out. Right? So you could pour this out into a jar and let it settle for another day, then top it up your empty jar with fresh solvent. Alright, another tip for vibrancy is to get to know your color wheel. Alright, so there are ways to boost the vibrancy of your color using other color. For instance, if you're looking at the back of this color wheel, you can see different blending of color. For instance, blue-violet, a mixture of blue and violet gets you blue-violet, and so on. But on the opposite end, you'll find the complement. So let's have a look and see how that may influence things. So let's mix up a violet. I'm going to use some cerulean, a little bit of alizarin, some more cerulean in there, get a bit of white, and I can see I've got a warm violet, a little bit more blue to cool it down, a little touch more white. Right, so we've got quite a vibrant violet. Now you may say, well, yeah, well, that's not bad, but how do I improve the vibrancy of that color? Well, what if we put this violet next to its complementary color, the yellow? All right. So violet next to its complement. Right, that has the effect of boosting this yellow considerably. So this yellow looks more vibrant next to its complement. But you may be well aware of this technique already. For instance, red. Nice and warm color, but if you put it next to green, just a small amount of green makes that red stand out all the more. Right, so that's a very simple technique, and you'll find that being used very often. Once again, let's just have a look at this example. Here we've got violet shadows, cool violet shadows against the yellow highlight in the focal area, making that yellow really pop. Here is some violets, more cleaner violet against these yellow highlights, making these yellow highlights, and also the greens really stand out a lot more. And here, for instance, I've got touches of red with a lot of green in the vicinity, so these reds really pop out and also accentuate the greens. But the trick is to have one dominate. So you want more red in this example and a little bit of green. You don't want it even. We have a lot of yellow, a little bit of violet. That's what you want. If everything is in equal amounts, then you don't know which is dominating, and it becomes confusing to the mind. An important aspect of vibrancy as well, besides getting to know your color mixing and your color wheel, is to apply a good brush technique. Now, I like to use quite a lot of paint on the brush. Right, so if I'm mixing up a sky blue with cerulean and white, I like to have a good amount and get that down fairly thick. I even will mix color wet into wet on the canvas. It's not mixed 100%. You can see some white, you can see mostly blue. That is an interesting mix, and it's a vibrant sky color. So using more paint on your brush gets you nice vibrant color notes. Now, another technique to keep in mind is not every painting has to be completed on the same day. Even a small painting, you may need to take some time. Now, this painting, for instance, I started roughing in 2 days ago. It's not dry, it's still wet, but it has been settling for a couple of days. I wasn't happy with the vibrancy in these yellows. But to keep applying wet yellow greens on top of each other was not going to help. So let the painting rest for a few days, let the paint just firm up a little, and then have another go. Mix in a yellow highlight, and now lay that in. Right, it takes nicely on top, binds to the semi-wet paint, but it's not mixing in to what is previously there, and as a result you can see a nice vibrant color note. Well, there's quite a lot to think about and digest in this video, so watch it again and try out, even if it is one thing, try it out and see what a difference it makes. I guarantee that if you follow these tips and techniques, your vibrancy in your color is going to improve, and these habits will stick with you as you develop through your painting career. Don't forget there are some important videos at the end of this as well, in the end roll, so have a look at those, specifically about the key of color. That is a very useful technique and lesson to take in as well. Alright, if you found this video useful, and I'm going to guess that it will be useful, then please make sure you've subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. If you can share this with somebody, a painting friend, that would be great as well. Alright, we'll see you soon in the next video. Until then, cheers for now.